The afternoon sun was starting to dip lower in the sky when James stepped out of the small corner store, a plastic bag in one hand and his white cane in the other. His German shepherd Duke walked close beside him, the way he'd been trained to do. James couldn't see the parking lot in front of him. But he'd made this trip so many times over the past 3 years that he knew exactly where he was going. 42 years old, James had once been able to see everything. He remembered colors, faces, and sunsets. But that was before Afghanistan, before the explosion that changed everything. Now the world existed only in sounds, smells, and the pressure of air against his skin. Duke was his eyes now, and together they'd learned to navigate a world that wasn't always kind to people who were different. Today was supposed to be simple. Just a quick run to grab some groceries, same as he did every week. But as James and Duke approached the parking lot, he heard voices. Young voices, male. 3 of them, maybe 4. They were laughing about something. That careless kind of laughter that comes easy when you're in your early 20s and think the whole world belongs to you. James kept walking, his cane tapping the familiar rhythm against the concrete. He wasn't looking for trouble. Never was. His 12 years in the Marines had taught him that the smartest fighter was the one who avoided fights altogether. "Yo, check this out," one of the voices said. It was closer than James had thought. Maybe 10 feet away. "Dude's got on sunglasses and it's barely even sunny." Another voice chimed in, followed by more laughter. James felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face neutral. This wasn't the first time someone had made comments. Probably wouldn't be the last. People didn't always understand that dark glasses weren't a fashion choice for him. They were necessary. His eyes didn't work right anymore, and bright light caused him pain. He kept walking, Duke's steady presence beside him giving him confidence. Just a few more steps to the sidewalk, then the familiar route home. But then he heard it. The rattle of metal wheels on concrete. A shopping cart. And it was moving fast. The cart crashed into his path and James stopped short, his cane bumping against it. Duke let out a low growl, protective but controlled. "Oops, my bad," one of the voices said, but the laughter that followed made it clear it was no accident. James took a slow breath. Stay calm, don't react. That's what his therapist had told him. Some people just don't know better. Some people haven't learned yet. "Excuse me," James said, his voice steady. "I just need to get past." "Oh, he talks." The voice sounded delighted, like they'd discovered something entertaining. "We didn't know if you could hear us or whatever." "I can hear you just fine," James replied. He reached down to touch Duke's head, a reminder to himself as much as to the dog to stay calm. "So what's it like?" another voice asked. "Being blind and all? Can you see anything? Like shapes or whatever?" James had answered these questions before from curious kids, from genuinely interested people. But something about the tone told him this wasn't genuine curiosity. This was something else. "It's just different," he said simply. "Now if you'll excuse me." He tried to move around the shopping cart, but suddenly there were footsteps. Someone had moved directly into his path. Hold up," the voice said. It belonged to someone who thought he was funny, someone who'd probably never been told no in his life. "We're just trying to have a conversation here." "That's rude, man, just walking away." James's pulse quickened, but his training kicked in. Assess the situation. 3, maybe 4 young men, all in front of him based on the voices. No sounds of other people nearby, though he could hear traffic in the distance. The store was behind him. He was essentially boxed in. "I don't want any trouble," James said. His voice had changed slightly, dropped into a different register. Anyone who'd served with him in the Marines would have recognized it instantly. It was the voice he used before things got serious. Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? The voice was right in front of him now, maybe 2 feet away. James could smell cheap beer and cigarette smoke. "We're just talking." "Unless you got a problem with talking?" Duke growled again, louder this time. James felt the harness tug slightly as the dog shifted position, placing himself more firmly between James and the threat. "Nice dog," another voice said. "What kind is it?" "German Shepherd." "Those are expensive, right?" "He's a service dog," James said firmly. "He's working." "Working? Doing what exactly?" "Standing there?" The laughter again. 3 distinct voices laughing. So definitely 3 of them. James heard movement to his right. Someone was circling around, trying to get a look at Duke from another angle. "Yo, what you think would happen if we just took him?" the voice said. "Like you couldn't even chase us." You wouldn't even know which way we went. That's when something shifted in James. They could mock him. They could make their stupid jokes about his blindness. But Duke wasn't just a pet. Duke was his independence. Duke was the difference between being able to live his life and being trapped in his apartment. Duke was his partner. "Don't touch my dog," James said. His voice was quiet but carried weight. Or what? The challenge was clear. The voice was directly in front of him again. "What you gonna do about it, blind man? You can't even see me." James felt a hand on his chest, a shove. Not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to make him take a step back. Hard enough to cross a line. In that moment, James had a choice. He could try to back away, try to leave, hope they'd get bored and let him go. That's what most people would expect a blind man to do. That's probably what these three young men expected. But James wasn't most people. He'd spent 12 years in the Marines. 4 of those years, he'd been a hand-to-hand combat instructor. He'd taught hundreds of Marines how to fight, how to defend themselves, how to neutralize threats. The explosion that took his sight hadn't taken his training. It hadn't taken his muscle memory. It hadn't taken his ability to read a situation through sound and movement alone. "Last warning," James said, his voice dropping even lower. "Step back, walk away. We can all forget this happened." The response was more laughter. The hand shoved him again, harder this time. "What are you gonna do? Call for help?" The mockery was thick in the voice. "Who's gonna help you, man? You're out here all alone." But that's where they were wrong. James wasn't alone. He had Duke, he had his training. And he had something these 3 young men didn't have. The absolute certainty that he could handle whatever came next. What these 3 didn't know, what they couldn't see beneath the blind man's calm exterior, was that they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The shove came again, and this time James was ready. Everything was about to change. The thing about being blind is that most people think it makes you helpless. They see the cane, the dark glasses, the service dog, and they automatically assume you're vulnerable, that you need protecting, that you can't defend yourself. James had thought that way once too, right after the explosion. Lying in that hospital bed in Germany, bandages wrapped around his head, being told he'd never see again. He remembered the fear. The absolute terror of thinking his life was over at 30 years old. But that was 12 years ago. And James had learned something important in those 12 years. Vision isn't just about eyes. It's about awareness. And sometimes, when you lose one sense, the others get sharper, much sharper. Standing in that parking lot facing 3 men who thought he was an easy target, James's mind flashed back to a different time. A different place. It was 2009 and he was in Kandahar teaching a group of fresh recruits how to fight without weapons. The Marine Corps had sent him through advanced training, made him an expert in hand-to-hand combat. His job was to turn scared kids into warriors who could defend themselves if everything else failed. Fighting isn't about being the strongest, he'd told those young Marines. It's about reading your opponent, listening, feeling the air move when they swing, understanding balance and leverage. One of the recruits had raised his hand. "But sir, what if you can't see the enemy coming?" James had smiled at that question. "Then you learn to fight in the dark. Because I promise you, combat doesn't always happen in broad daylight. You learn to use your ears, your instincts, your training." He'd made them practice blindfolded, made them learn to sense movement, to react to sound, to trust their bodies when their eyes couldn't help them. Some of them had complained, called it pointless. But the ones who really learned, who really understood, they were the ones who came home. James never imagined he'd be using those same skills himself one day. Never imagined that his own training would become his lifeline after that IED turned his world to permanent darkness. The explosion had happened on his 3rd tour. His unit was clearing a village outside Kandahar when the ground just erupted beneath them. James remembered the sound, the heat, and then nothing. When he woke up 3 days later, the doctors told him about the traumatic brain injury, about the damage to his optic nerves, about how sight wasn't coming back. The next 2 years were the hardest of his life, harder than boot camp, harder than combat. Learning to shower, to cook, to walk down a street without terror gripping his chest, learning to trust a dog named Duke to be his eyes, learning to accept that life wasn't over, just different. But through it all, his body remembered. His muscles remembered every throw, every block, every pressure point he'd taught to hundreds of Marines. His ears learned to pick up things sighted people never noticed. The shuffle of feet on concrete, The shift in breathing that comes right before someone moves. The change in air pressure when someone gets close. Back in the parking lot, the hand shoved him a third time, and that's when James felt it. The guy was off balance, leaning forward too much, putting too much weight into the shove. Amateur mistake. The kind of mistake James had corrected in trainees 1,000 times. "You really don't want to do this," James said quietly. Duke was tense beside him, waiting for a command. "Oh, I think I do," the voice said. Cocky, confident, stupid. James heard footsteps behind him. One of the others was trying to flank him, probably thinking they were clever. But James had fought in actual combat. These weren't insurgents with weapons. These were just kids who'd never been taught respect. "I served 12 years in the Marines," James said, giving them one more chance. "I taught hand-to-hand combat. I'm telling you this as a courtesy." "Walk away. Marines?"
One of them laughed.
"Man, what Marines want with a blind dude? What did you do, fold laundry?" That one hurt more than the shoves. James had earned his rank, had earned his commendations, had bled for his country, and these three thought it was all a joke. "I lost my sight in Afghanistan," James said, his voice tight. "Saved 3 of my men pulling them from a burning vehicle before the second IED went off. Got a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. Lost my vision, but everyone else made it home." There was a pause. Maybe they felt something. Maybe a flicker of understanding. But then one of them laughed again, and James knew they were too far gone. Too caught up in their own ego to back down now. "Cool story, bro. Still can't see, though, can you?" The hand reached for Duke's harness. That was the final line. Touch a veteran service dog, and you've crossed into territory you can't come back from. Duke wasn't just a dog. He was James's independence, his freedom, his ability to live life on his own terms. James felt the tug on the harness through the handle he was holding. Felt Duke shift. Heard the guy grunt as he pulled. "Duke, stay," James commanded. His voice was steel. Then to the 3 men, he said something he'd said to countless trainees over the years. "I'm going to give you a 10-second head start. After that, I stop being nice. Nice?" The voice was right in front of him, maybe 18 inches away. James could smell the beer stronger now. Could hear the slight slur in the words. "Day drinking, great. You ain't done nothing. You can't do nothing." 10, James said calmly. "What are you counting?" 9. "Yo, this dude is crazy." 8. Behind him, one of them laughed nervously. The confident one in front of him didn't move. 7. James could hear everything now. His training had kicked in completely. 3 targets. One directly in front, about 5'10", maybe 170 pounds based on his voice and the sound of his steps. One to the left, about 6 feet away. Heavier, probably 200 pounds. One behind, trying to circle around to the right. Lighter, younger sounding. 6. "Man, forget this," the one behind him said. But he didn't leave. 5. The one in front shoved him again. Harder this time. "Stop counting." 4. This time James didn't step back. He absorbed the shove, letting his body move just slightly, reading the force and direction. 3. "Dude, I think we should," the heavy one on the left started to say. 2. The one in front grabbed James's shirt. "I said stop!" 1. That's when everything changed. The guy in front pulled back his fist and James heard it. The intake of breath, the rotation of the shoulder, the movement of air. He'd been waiting for it, training for it his whole career. And now, standing in a parking lot, facing 3 men who'd made the worst decision of their lives, James was about to teach a lesson. The punch came forward, and James moved, everything his instructors had taught him, everything he'd practiced in the dark, everything he'd learned about fighting without sight. It all came together in one smooth motion. The 3 young men were about to learn what 12 years of Marine Corps training really meant. And they were about to learn that underestimating someone based on their disability was a mistake. They'd never forget the fight was on. Punch never landed. James moved his head just 6 inches to the left, and the fist went sailing past his ear. He heard the whoosh of air, felt the breeze on his cheek. In the same motion, his hand shot up and grabbed the guy's wrist. Not hard, not aggressive, just firm and controlled. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but to the 3 young men it probably felt like an eternity. James twisted the wrist in a way that forced the guy's entire body to follow. It's called a come-along hold, something every law enforcement officer and military police learn in their first week. The guy had no choice but to spin around or have his wrist broken. He spun. James added just enough pressure to the shoulder. and suddenly the cocky guy who'd been shoving him around was face down on the pavement, his arm locked behind his back at an angle that made movement impossible. "Stay down," James said calmly, like he was asking someone to pass the salt. The whole thing had been so smooth, so effortless that for a moment nobody moved. The guy on the ground groaned. The other two just stood there shocked. "What the—" The heavy one on the left started to say. That's when he made his move. James heard him coming, the heavy footsteps rushing forward, probably thinking he could tackle the blind man while he was distracted. Wrong move. James released the first guy and pivoted. The charging man ran right into James's extended arm, which caught him perfectly across the chest. It wasn't a punch. James didn't need to punch. He just used the guy's own momentum against him, redirecting his energy the way water flows around a rock. The heavy guy stumbled sideways, crashed into a parked car, and went down hard. The car alarm started blaring, adding to the chaos. 2 down in less than 10 seconds. The third guy, the one who'd been circling around, stopped dead in his tracks. "Yo, yo, yo. Hold up, we're done." "We're done." James stood perfectly still, his breathing steady. Duke sat beside him, alert but calm. The dog had seen James train before. This wasn't anything new to Duke. "You should have been done 5 minutes ago," James said. His voice wasn't angry, wasn't triumphant. Just matter of fact. "I gave you multiple chances to walk away." The first guy, still on the ground, tried to get up. James heard the movement and took 1 step forward. "I said stay down. Don't make me repeat myself." The guy froze. By now people were starting to notice. James could hear voices, footsteps, the electronic chirp of cell phones taking videos. Great. The last thing he wanted was to end up on social media, but he hadn't started this. He'd tried to avoid it. "Is everyone okay over there?" a woman's voice called out. Older, concerned. James recognized it, Mrs. Chen, who worked at the store. She'd always been kind to him, always made sure nobody bothered him when he shopped. "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen," James called back. "Just had a misunderstanding with these gentlemen." "Misunderstanding?" The heavy guy wheezed from beside the car. "You attacked us." James almost laughed at that. "Almost. There are witnesses," James said calmly, "and I'm pretty sure at least 5 people just recorded what happened. So let's be very clear about who did what." "He's right," someone from the growing crowd shouted. "I got the whole thing. These punks were harassing him." "Me too," another voice added. "I saw them push him first." The first guy, still on the ground, seemed to realize the situation he was in. "Man, come on, let me up. This is embarrassing." "It should be embarrassing," James said. "You attacked a disabled veteran in broad daylight. You tried to take his service dog. You made fun of someone for being blind. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty embarrassing." "We didn't know you were a veteran," the third guy said, his voice shaky now. "Would it have mattered?" James asked. "Should it matter? You saw someone you thought was helpless and decided to mess with them. That says everything about who you are." Sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police. James sighed. This day had gone completely off the rails. "Listen," James said, addressing all 3 of them. "When the police get here, you have 2 choices. You can tell them you attacked me and I defended myself, which is what happened. Or you can lie and try to say I started it. And then all these witnesses and videos will prove you wrong, and you'll add lying to police to your charges." The heavy guy pulled himself up, leaning against the car. "Charges? What charges?" "Assault," James said simply. "Harassment. Attempted theft of a service animal. Possibly a hate crime, given you were targeting me specifically because of my disability. Should I keep going?" The 3 men looked at each other. Even without seeing them, James could feel their panic building. "We're sorry, okay?" the first guy said from the ground. "Can you just let me up?" "Please?" James considered it for a moment. Part of him wanted to keep the guy pinned until the police arrived. But that wasn't who he was. He'd made his point. "If I let you up, you sit on that curb and you don't move until the police get here. Understood?" Yeah, understood." James released the pressure and stepped back. The guy scrambled up and immediately went to sit on the curb, rubbing his wrist. The other 2 joined him, looking like kids who'd been caught stealing candy. The sirens were getting closer. Mrs. Chen came over to James, gently touching his arm so he'd know she was there. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No, ma'am. I'm fine." "I called 911 as soon as they started bothering you," she said. "I told them someone was attacking a blind veteran. The dispatcher said officers were already nearby." "Thank you," James said sincerely. Those boys should be ashamed. Mrs. Chen continued, loud enough for them to hear. You come here every week. You're always polite, always kind. And this is how they treat you? The crowd murmured in agreement. James could feel the support, and it meant more than these people probably knew. Sometimes, when you're disabled, you feel invisible, like people look through you instead of at you. But right now, these strangers had his back. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. James heard 4 doors open. 4 officers. That seemed like overkill for a parking lot scuffle, but maybe it was a slow day. All right, what's going on here? A male voice called out, authority in the tone, probably the senior officer. Before James could answer, multiple people in the crowd started talking at once. Everyone wanted to tell the story. Everyone wanted to make sure the officers knew what really happened. One at a time, the officer said. Then who called 911? I did, Mrs. Chen said. I work at the store. I saw everything. Okay, ma'am, we'll get your statement. Sir, the officer said, and James knew he was talking to him. Are you the victim here? I'm the one who was attacked, yes, James said. But I'm not hurt. I defended myself. He sure did. Someone from the crowd yelled. You should have seen it. It was like watching a movie. Sir, what's your name? The officer asked James. James Patterson. I'm a veteran. Marine Corps. There was a pause. Then the officer's voice changed just slightly. Got a bit more respectful. Thank you for your service, sir. Can you tell me what happened? James was about to answer when another voice cut in. A voice that made him freeze. James? James Patterson? Is that really you? James turned his head toward the voice. It was one of the other officers. And there was something familiar about it. Something that brought back memories of sand and heat and training grounds halfway around the world. Sir, do I know you? James asked. It's me, Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez. You taught my combat course back in 2013 in Kandahar, right before... The officer trailed off, not wanting to say it. Right before I got injured, James finished. Rodriguez. I remember you. You had trouble with the chokeholds at first. Yes, sir. You spent an extra hour with me, made sure I got it right. Sir, what happened here? And just like that, everything shifted again. Officer Rodriguez couldn't believe what he was seeing. The man who'd taught him how to survive hand-to-hand combat. The instructor who'd saved his life with those very lessons during a close-quarters engagement in Helmand Province was standing in a grocery store parking lot dealing with 3 idiots who clearly had no idea who they'd messed with. Sir, are you telling me these 3 attacked you? Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying an edge that made the 3 young men shift uncomfortably on the curb. They did, James confirmed. Started with verbal harassment, moved to physical assault, and one of them tried to take my service dog. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He turned to look at the 3 men, and his expression made them all lean back slightly. You tried to take a veteran's service dog? His voice was quiet, but somehow that made it worse. Do you have any idea how serious that is? The first guy, the one who'd thrown the punch, spoke up. We didn't know he was a veteran. We thought... You thought what? The senior officer cut in. His name tag read Thompson. You thought it was okay to attack a blind man? Is that what you're about to say? Silence from the curb. Thompson turned to James. Sir, I'm going to need to get statements from everyone, but first, are you sure you're not injured? Do you need medical attention? I'm fine, officer. Not a scratch on me. What about them? Thompson gestured to the 3 young men. Rodriguez walked over to examine them. The first guy was still rubbing his wrist. The heavy one had a scrape on his elbow from hitting the car. The third looked physically fine, but emotionally wrecked. Minor injuries, Rodriguez reported. Nothing serious. Good, Thompson said. Then to the 3 men, you're lucky. Very lucky. If he'd wanted to really hurt you, we'd be calling ambulances instead of taking statements. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her phone in her hand. Officer, I have security footage from the store camera. It shows everything. And at least 6 other people recorded it on their phones. Thompson nodded. We'll need copies of all of that. Ma'am, can you start from the beginning and tell me exactly what you saw? As Mrs. Chen gave her statement, more witnesses came forward. A young woman who'd been getting out of her car. An older man who'd been waiting for his wife. A teenager who'd been sitting on a bench nearby. Every single one of them told the same story. The 3 men had started it. James had tried to walk away. They'd pushed him. He'd defended himself. Rodriguez knelt down in front of the 3 men, his voice low enough that only they could hear. Let me explain something to you, he said. That man right there? He's the reason I'm alive today. We got ambushed in a village and the enemy got close. Too close for weapons. Everything he taught me about hand-to-hand combat I used that day. I made it home because of him. The first guy swallowed hard. We really didn't know. It shouldn't matter, Rodriguez said sharply. You attacked someone you thought was helpless. That's who you are. That's the choice you made, and now you get to live with the consequences. He stood up and walked back to Thompson, who was finishing up with the witnesses. What do we have? Thompson asked. Multiple witnesses, video evidence, and physical evidence of assault, Rodriguez said. Open and shut case, plus attempted theft of a service animal, which is a felony in this state. The three men on the curb looked at each other, panic spreading across their faces. Wait, felony? The heavy one said. Come on, man, we didn't actually take the dog. You tried, Thompson said. Intent matters. And with video evidence of you reaching for the harness, that's attempted theft. The first guy stood up suddenly. Okay, look, we messed up. We messed up bad. But please, can we talk to him? To Mr. Patterson? Thompson looked at James. Sir, they're asking to speak with you. You're under no obligation to talk to them. James was quiet for a moment. Duke pressed against his leg, sensing his handler's thoughts. Finally, James nodded. I'll hear what they have to say. Rodriguez led the three men over to where James stood. They kept their distance, respectful now in a way they should have been from the start. Sir, the first guy started, his voice shaky. We're really sorry. What we did was wrong. All of it. We were stupid and drunk and we thought, I don't know what we thought. You thought I was an easy target, James said simply. You saw the cane and the dog and you figured I couldn't defend myself. You figured it would be funny. It wasn't funny, the third guy said quietly. It was cruel. We see that now, do you? James asked. Or do you see it now because you got caught? Because there are police here and witnesses and videos? Would you see it if you'd gotten away with it? None of them had an answer for that. I want you to understand something, James continued. I lost my sight serving this country. I lost it pulling my men from a burning vehicle because that's what you do. You don't leave people behind. And after I lost my sight, I had to learn how to live all over again. How to make coffee. How to cross a street. How to exist in a world that wasn't built for people like me. The heavy guy wiped his eyes. He was crying. Every day is hard, James said. Every single day I wake up in darkness and I have to choose to keep going. To not give up. To believe that my life still has value even though I can't see. And then people like you come along and treat me like I'm nothing. Like I'm less than human because I'm different. We're sorry, the first guy said again. And this time there were tears in his voice too. We're so sorry. Thompson stepped forward. Gentlemen, here's the situation. Based on the evidence and statements, we have grounds to arrest all three of you for assault, harassment, and attempted theft. Those are serious charges that could result in jail time and permanent criminal records. All three of them looked like they might be sick. However, Thompson continued, looking at James, the final decision on pressing charges rests with Mr. Patterson. Sir, what would you like to do? Everyone went silent. The crowd that had gathered leaned in slightly. Even the traffic seemed to quiet down. This was the moment that would determine what happened next. James stood there, his face unreadable behind his dark glasses. His hand rested on Duke's head. Rodriguez watched his former instructor, wondering what he would choose. Mercy or justice, both would be fair. Finally, James spoke. I want to ask you three a question, he said, and I want honest answers. Do you think you learned something today? Do you think this changed you? Or are you just sorry you got caught? The third guy spoke first. I learned something. I swear I did. I'll never look at someone with a disability the same way again. I'll never make assumptions about what someone can or can't do. The heavy guy nodded vigorously. Me too, this was a wake-up call. A big one. The first guy took a shaky breath. Sir, I don't even recognize who I was an hour ago. What we did to you, it makes me sick. I want to be better. I want to do better. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Thompson. Officer, I'm willing to not press charges on one condition. What's that, sir? These three are going to volunteer at the Veterans Hospital. 50 hours each. They're going to meet other veterans who've sacrificed for this country. They're going to hear their stories. They're going to learn what service really means. And Officer Rodriguez here is going to check on them personally to make sure they complete every single hour with the right attitude. Rodriguez straightened up. I'd be honored to, sir. Thompson looked at the three young men. You heard him. This is a gift you don't deserve. Do you accept these terms? All three nodded frantically. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We won't let you down. You already let me down, James said quietly. Now you get a chance to prove you can do better. Don't waste it. 3 months later, James walked through the automatic doors of the Veterans Hospital, Duke leading the way down the familiar hallway. He came here every Tuesday afternoon to visit with other veterans, to share stories, to remind them they weren't alone. It was his way of giving back, of finding purpose in a life that had been turned upside down. He was halfway to the recreation room when he heard a voice he recognized. Mr. Patterson, sir? James stopped and turned his head toward the sound. The voice was familiar, but different somehow. More respectful. More mature. Do I know you? James asked, though something in the back of his mind was already putting the pieces together. It's me, from the parking lot. 3 months ago. James felt Duke shift slightly beside him, remembering. It was the first guy, the one who'd thrown the punch that started everything. I remember, James said carefully. You're doing your volunteer hours? Yes, sir. All three of us are. We're here every Saturday and Sunday. Officer Rodriguez checks on us every week like he promised. There was something different in the young man's voice. The cockiness was gone. The attitude had disappeared. He sounded genuine. How's it going? James asked. It's been life-changing, sir. Can I walk with you for a minute? I'd like to tell you something. James nodded, and they started walking slowly down the hallway together, Duke maintaining his steady pace. My name is Tyler, by the way. I don't think I ever actually introduced myself properly. James, he replied, even though Tyler already knew his name, so. That first day we came here, Tyler began. I'm not going to lie, I was angry. I felt like we were being punished for something that wasn't that big a deal. I kept telling myself you overreacted, that we were just joking around. James listened but didn't interrupt. Then Rodriguez brought us to the burn unit. Tyler continued, his voice getting quieter. There was this guy there, Staff Sergeant Miller. He was 24 years old. IED explosion saved his whole unit, but he got caught in the blast. Burns over 60% of his body. And you know what he was doing when we walked in? What? He was laughing. Joking with the nurses. Talking about his wedding next month. This guy who'd been through hell, who had to relearn how to use his hands, and he was just grateful to be alive. They reached the recreation room, but Tyler wasn't finished. He told us his story, and then he said something I think about every single day. He said, I didn't survive this to be bitter. I survived this to live. And it hit me, sir. What we did to you that day. We saw someone who'd survived, and we tried to make them feel small. We tried to take away their dignity. James could hear the emotion in Tyler's voice. Real emotion. Not the panic of getting caught, but genuine remorse. There's more, Tyler said. My friend Brian, the big guy who hit your car, he met a veteran who lost both legs. The guy runs marathons now. Marathons. And Brian broke down crying right there in the hallway. Said he'd spent his whole life complaining about things that didn't matter while people like that veteran were out there accomplishing the impossible. And your other friend? James asked. Chris. He's been working with a vet who has PTSD. The guy's younger than us, only 22. Chris sits with him during his bad days, just keeps him company. Last week, the guy told Chris that having him there helped more than any medicine. Chris cried when he told me that. They stood outside the recreation room door. Inside, James could hear the familiar sounds of his Tuesday group. Veterans talking, laughing, supporting each other. Why are you telling me this? James asked. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Because I need you to know it wasn't fake. What we said that day about learning and changing, we meant it. This place, these people, they showed us what real strength looks like, what real courage is, and it's not what we thought. What did you think it was? I thought it was about being tough, about not backing down, about proving you're better than everyone else. Tyler paused. But these veterans showed me that real strength is getting back up after life knocks you down. It's choosing to help others even when you're struggling yourself. It's people like you who had every right to press charges and ruin our lives, but chose to give us a chance instead. James felt something shift in his chest. When he'd made that decision 3 months ago, he'd honestly wasn't sure if it would make any difference. People said they'd change all the time. Actually doing it was different. I'm glad you learned something, James said simply. Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you give us that chance? We didn't deserve it. James thought about the question. It was something he'd asked himself too in the days after the incident. Because somebody gave me a chance once, he said finally. When I first lost my sight, I was angry. Really angry. I said some terrible things to my doctors, my therapists, my family. I pushed everyone away because I was scared and hurt and I didn't know how to deal with it. Tyler listened intently. There was this one nurse, James continued. Every day I'd snap at her, refuse to cooperate, make her job miserable. And every day she'd come back, patient as ever, telling me that my anger was understandable, but it didn't have to define me. She didn't give up on me even when I'd given up on myself. What happened? Eventually I realized she was right. I could be angry or I could learn to live again. I chose to live. And I figured if someone gave me that chance when I was at my worst, maybe I could pass it on. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, sir, for real. I know I already said it, but thank you. Don't thank me, James said. Thank me by being better. By treating people with respect. By understanding that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. I will, sir. I promise. They shook hands and Tyler headed back to whatever task he'd been assigned. James and Duke continued into the recreation room. James! There you are! A voice called out. It was Robert, a Vietnam vet who'd lost a leg in combat. We've been waiting for you. Got a new guy here today, just got back from his third surgery. Thought you might talk to him. Happy to, James said, making his way over to where Robert was sitting. The new veteran was young, probably mid-20s. James could hear the despair in his breathing, the kind of defeated posture that comes when you think your life is over. Son, I'm James, he said, extending his hand. I heard you just had surgery. How are you holding up? Not great, the young man admitted. I don't know how to do this, how to live like this. James sat down next to him. Mind if I tell you something? It gets easier. Not easy, but easier, and you're not alone in figuring it out. How do you deal with it? With people staring? With feeling like you're broken? Well, James said, and he couldn't help but smile slightly. I can't see people staring, so that helps. The young veteran let out a surprised laugh. It was small, but it was genuine. But seriously, James continued, you deal with it one day at a time. Some days are hard. Some days are really hard. But some days are good, and eventually the good days start to outnumber the bad ones. You really believe that? I know it. I'm living it. They talked for over an hour. About adjusting. About challenges, about finding purpose after trauma. And as James shared his story, he realized something. The incident in the parking lot, as terrible as it had been in the moment, had led to something positive. 3 young men were learning compassion. They were spending time with veterans, hearing their stories, understanding sacrifice. Sometimes, James thought, the worst moments lead to the best lessons. Later that evening, as James and Duke walked home from the bus stop, his phone rang. It was Rodriguez. James, I wanted to give you an update on those 3, the officer said. They completed their 50 hours 2 weeks ago. Oh? They asked if they could keep volunteering. All 3 of them. Tyler's there 4 days a week now. Brian started a fundraiser for the hospital's recreation equipment, and Chris is taking classes to become a counselor so he can work with veterans professionally. James stopped walking. You're serious? Dead serious. I didn't think it would work, honestly. But you changed those kids? They're not the same people who hassled you that day. After he hung up, James stood on the sidewalk for a moment, Duke patient beside him. The evening air was cool, and he could hear the neighborhood settling in for the night. Kids playing in a yard nearby. A car driving past. Normal, everyday sounds. He thought about Tyler's question. Why did you give us a chance? The truth was, mercy wasn't about whether people deserved it. It was about believing people could be better than their worst moment. It was about remembering that everyone makes mistakes and what matters is what you do after. James had made a choice that day in the parking lot. Not the easy choice, but the right one. And 3 young men who'd mocked a blind veteran were now serving other veterans with genuine dedication and respect. Come on, Duke, James said, starting to walk again. Let's go home. As they walked, James smiled to himself. He couldn't see the sunset, couldn't see the trees or the houses or the people passing by. But he could see something more important. He could see that kindness matters, that second chances work, that people can change, and sometimes that's the only vision that really counts.